Max Carter stood on Everbrook Farm, gazing at the field swaying gently in the wind. This farm had been in his family for generations and was filled with memories of laughter, hard work, and the beauty of nature. As the sun set, the sky turned from blue to orange, creating a peaceful scene. But that peace was about to be shattered. Suddenly, Karen Davis, the president of the local homeowners association, HOA, appeared at his porch. Dressed in her formal attire, she looked like a storm cloud ready to unleash rain. Max had seen her patrol the neighborhood, wearing her HOA badge like a crown. She had a reputation for being strict and unforgiving. "Max, we need to talk," she said with a sharp tone. Her arms were crossed, and her eyebrows were knitted together. "Your farm is an eyesore for the community. You need to change your ways or face serious consequences." Max felt a rush of anger. "This farm has been here long before your fancy houses. I'm not going to change it for anyone." Her smile was cold and condescending. "You have no idea how many complaints I've received. The noise from your roosters, the mess, and the barn color, it's unacceptable." She waved a hand dismissively, as if brushing him away. Max stood tall. "I've worked hard to maintain this farm. I won't let you bully me into submission. This is my home." With a scoff, Karen turned on her heel, leaving Max feeling both frustrated and determined. The sun dipped lower, and shadows crept across the porch. He could hear the distant sounds of his goats bleating and the rustle of leaves, and he felt a connection to the land around him. Days turned into a blur of stress, with Karen's complaints piling up. "Your farm is too noisy. We can't have goats in the neighborhood. Your barn isn't up to code." Each letter felt like a personal attack, chipping away at Max's resolve. His heart ached as he read the harsh words, wondering how people could dislike something so alive and full of spirit. One evening, feeling defeated, Max trudged to the barn. It was a familiar place filled with the scent of hay and the warmth of his animals. The barn stood proud, painted a vibrant red, a symbol of his family's hard work. As he stroked the neck of his favorite goat, Daisy, he knew he had to do something. He couldn't allow anyone to take his home or his legacy away. He decided to talk to Mr. Thompson, an older neighbor who had fought against Karen's rules years ago. Mr. Thompson was known as a fighter, someone who stood up for what he believed in. Max hoped he would have some advice. "Mr. Thompson, can I talk to you?" Max asked, finding him sitting on his porch with a cup of tea. "Of course, Maximum. What's troubling you?" Mr. Thompson looked at him, concern etched in his wise eyes. "It's Karen Davis. She's trying to make me conform to her rules, and I refuse to change my farm. But I feel like I'm losing this battle." Mr. Thompson nodded slowly. "Karen uses fear to control people. She wants everyone to live her way. You have to stand your ground and be smart about it." Max listened closely. "How did you handle her?" "Well, I educated myself about local laws and what rights I had as a farmer. I fought back with facts and stood up to her at the HOA meetings. It wasn't easy, but I didn't back down." Inspired, Max went home that night and pored over local laws about farming and land rights. Night after night, he researched with determination. He learned about the Right to Farm Act that gave farmers certain protections against nuisance complaints. It was a small light in the darkness, and it gave him hope. After weeks of gathering knowledge and preparing his arguments, the tension between Max and Karen reached a breaking point. She showed up on his property one afternoon with a group of her supporters. "This is it, Max. We're putting our foot down. Your farm is ruining our neighborhood." Max took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "You can't just bully me. This farm has been in my family for generations. People are fed up." "You're the problem," Karen snapped, her tone dripping with disdain. At that moment, he spotted Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman, watching from her porch. She didn't say anything, but her eyes met his with a nod of solidarity. It warmed his heart to know someone believed in him. Max stood firm. "You think you can scare me away? I know my rights. I'm not going anywhere." Karen's face twisted in anger. "You'll regret this, Maximum. We will not tolerate your farm ruining our property values." With that, she marched off, leaving Max feeling a mix of anger and resolve. The night fell around him, and he could hear the frogs croaking in the pond nearby. Max felt invigorated, ready for the fight ahead. He gathered his notes, strong arguments, and supportive neighbors. He knew he might be outnumbered, but he would not back down. Max spent the next few weeks rallying support from his friends and neighbors who appreciated the warmth of the farm, the children who loved visiting the animals and families who enjoyed the fresh produce. They all stood together in harmony, promising to support him in any upcoming HOA meetings. He prepared a speech that reflected their love for the farm and what it meant for the community. Max was determined to show that life on Everbrook Farm was not an eyesore but a source of joy and a connection to nature. As the day of the HOA meeting approached, Max felt a mix of excitement and nerves. He knew this was more than just a meeting. It was a battle for his family's legacy and way of life. With the support around him, he was beginning to believe he could win. He stood by his barn that night, looking out over the fields that shimmered under the moonlight. With every breath he took, he felt the strength of his ancestors with him, a reminder of the struggle and the beauty that could come from standing firm. The challenge ahead was daunting, but Max was ready. The heart of the farm beat strong within him, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. He stood by his barn that night, looking out over the fields that shimmered under the moonlight. With every breath he took, he felt the strength of his ancestors with him, a reminder of the struggle and the beauty that could come from standing firm. The next day came quickly, and Max felt the weight of the upcoming HOA meeting pressing down on him. He had invited his friends and neighbors to attend, understanding how important their presence would be to show the strength of community. Just before heading to the meeting, he gathered everyone in his barn, the familiar scent of hay reminding him of the farm's warmth and history. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today isn't just about me. It's about all of us. This farm is part of our community. It connects us to our roots and reminds us of the simple joys in life." Everyone nodded in agreement. Max could see the determination in their eyes, reflecting his own resolve. As they made their way to the meeting, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The community center was packed with residents, many whispering and murmuring about the ongoing conflict with Maximum. When he walked into the room, a hush fell over the crowd. He felt every eye on him, but he also felt the support from his friends behind him. Karen stood at the front, a smug smile on her face as she prepared to address the crowd. "This meeting is about restoring order to our community," she said, her tone sharp. "We need to address the issue of the farm that is ruining our neighborhood. Max's disregard for our rules is unacceptable." Max took a deep breath, feeling the unity of his friends rallying behind him. He stepped forward, raising a hand for attention. "I'd like to speak, please," he said confidently. The room turned even quieter, focused on him now. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, looking around the room. "I know some of you may not agree with my farming practices, but I want to share why Everbrook Farm is important, not just to me, but to all of us. It's a place where children can learn about animals, where families can enjoy fresh produce, and it's a part of our history. My family has worked this land for generations, and I plan to continue that legacy." A murmur of agreement flowed through the room as Max spoke. "I understand that noise and mess can be a concern, but I also believe in balancing both our needs as a community and the rights of farmers. We all have a right to enjoy our homes and our lives." Karen's expression hardened. "You're not addressing the real problem here, Maximum. Your farm affects property values and the overall aesthetic of our neighborhood." "Property values can't overshadow the importance of nature," Max replied passionately. "We can find a way to coexist. Communities around the country embrace local farms. There are ways to work together that benefit everyone. Imagine community events, farm fresh markets, and celebrations of nature." The energy in the room shifted. People began nodding, contemplating his vision of a harmonious neighborhood. Mr. Thompson stood up. "Max is right. It's not just about aesthetics, it's about community spirit. I fought against Karen's rules before, and I see now there's strength in unity. We can have a community that supports its farmers instead of tearing them down." Other neighbors started to chime in, sharing their positive experiences with the farm. "My kids love visiting," one mother said. "They learn where food comes from." "I appreciate how Max cares for the land," another neighbor added. "We need to keep farms alive to preserve our heritage." Max felt a surge of hope as more residents stood to share their support. His heart raced, knowing that together they were starting to reshape the narrative. Fearing the growing support for Max, Karen interrupted, her voice rising louder. "This is ridiculous. We can't allow noise and mess to take over. If we let one farm slide, what's next? This isn't about community, it's about maintaining standards." But Max wouldn't be silenced. "It's about finding common ground. We can hold farmers to standards while respecting their rights. Let's work together, not against each other." With everyone rallying behind him, the tide of the meeting began to shift. Karen could see her power loosening, her grip on the crowd fading. Desperation flashed across her face. She tried one last tactic. "Fine. Let's vote on it," she declared, her voice laced with irritation. "Let's see how many want to keep the farm or get rid of it." Max nodded, embracing the challenge. "Let's vote. But remember, this is about community, harmony, and the future we want." As the vote began, he felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. Neighbors stood in line to cast their ballots, and as they did, Max felt a connection grow stronger. Together, they were forging a bond that transcended the conflicts with Karen. Finally, the votes were tallied. The room was filled with an uncomfortable silence as the results came in. Max's heart thumped loudly in his chest. "The majority vote is in favor of celebrating local farms," the organizer announced. Cheers erupted from Max's supporters, voices ringing with jubilation. His family's legacy was safe, and the farm would remain a cherished part of the community. Karen's face turned pale as she took in the results. She stood there for a moment, stunned, before storming out of the room, rage fueling her departure. Max's friends gathered around him, voices filled with excitement. "You did it, Max! We did it!" His chest swelled with pride and relief. "This was never just me. We all fought for our community. Together, we can make it even better." As the meeting wrapped up, Max looked around the room, feeling a sense of belonging wash over him. They had fostered a movement, a recognition that the heart of the community beat strongest when everyone worked together. That night, Max returned to Everbrook Farm, the stars twinkling like promises in the sky. He felt the soil beneath him, the animals snuggling in their beds, and he knew he would continue to protect this land. He understood now it wasn't just a fight for his family, it was a shared journey with his neighbors. They could all share in the laughter, the produce, and the simple beauty of life on the farm. He smiled, appreciating the direction his life was taking, thankful for the friends who stood by him. Tomorrow would be a new day, and he was ready to build a brighter future for Everbrook Farm, together with his community. He smiled, appreciating the direction his life was taking, thankful for the friends who stood by him. Tomorrow would be a new day, and he was ready to build a brighter future for Everbrook Farm, together with his community. The morning sun spilled golden light across the fields as Max awoke with renewed energy. The air was crisp, filled with the sounds of chirping birds and the distant chatter of his animals. Every corner of his farm felt vibrant and alive, and Max could sense the shift in the neighborhood's attitude, an awakening that ignited hope and opportunity. As he went about his morning chores, he thought about how he could foster this newfound camaraderie with the community. Ideas began to flourish in his mind. After milking the cows and feeding the chickens, he hurriedly scribbled a list of potential events that could invite his neighbors to the farm. A farm fresh market, educational workshops for children about farming, and seasonal festivals featuring local artisans. These ideas could turn the farm into a hub of activity, connecting the community with the land and its bounty. That afternoon, Max gathered a handful of his supporters on the porch of his barn. The warmth of the sun bathed them in a golden glow as he laid out his vision. "I think we can create something amazing here," he said, excitement bubbling in his voice. "What if we host a harvest festival in the fall? We can have games, music, and a farm stand." The group murmured in agreement, many of their faces lighting up at the idea. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman who had stood by him during the meeting, spoke up with a sparkle in her eye. "I can bake pies. My peach cobbler is famous in these parts." "I could bring some of my home-brewed cider," one of the younger neighbors chimed in. As ideas flowed, a sense of unity filled the air. They gathered a list of everything they wanted to include, from face painting for kids to hayrides and loose-leaf teas made from herbs grown right at the farm. With each passing week, excitement began to build. The festival came to represent more than just celebrating the harvest. It was a chance for neighbors to connect, to find common ground, and to appreciate the beauty around them. Max felt invigorated, knowing that they were slowly transforming the perception of his farm from an eyesore to a treasured community gem. But amid all this positivity, Karen Davis was not done fighting. News of the festival reached her ears, and a storm brewed in her heart. She stewed over every detail, her mind racing with thoughts of how to undermine Max's efforts. "I can't let him get away with this," she muttered to herself as she paced her pristine living room, her eyes dark with anger. Determined to spoil the festival, she began to circulate rumors, suggesting that the event would be unregulated and a nuisance to the neighborhood. "Imagine the noise, the mess, and the chaos," she cried out during HOA meetings, trying to turn the tide of public opinion once more against Maximum. Yet, to her surprise, Some neighbors who had initially sided with her began to question her complaints. "But isn't it a community event for all of us?" one neighbor asked. "Can't we support our local farmers?" Weeks passed as the date for the Harvest Festival drew nearer. The barn was painted, signs were erected, and flyers promoting the event were passed out throughout the neighborhood. The farm buzzed with activity as friends and family members volunteered their time and energy. There was a renewed sense of purpose, with laughter echoing through the fields as children played games and learned about animals. Finally, the day of the Harvest Festival arrived, bright and sunny with a hint of autumn in the air. Max awoke early, excitement bubbling in his stomach. He stepped outside to see his farm transformed. Booths were set up selling homemade crafts, fresh produce, and bakeries. Children ran around with face paint, and laughter ricocheted off the walls of the barn. As the hours passed, more and more families arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. Local musicians played folk tunes in the background, couples danced, and the smell of homemade food wafted through the air. Max greeted every neighbor with a smile, grateful for the newfound community spirit. But then he spotted Karen standing on the edge of the festivities, arms crossed, her expression a mix of disdain and disbelief. "This should never have happened," she muttered under her breath. It lit a fire in Max's belly. He was not just protecting his farm but building a community strong enough to stand together and enjoy each other's company. He took a deep breath and approached her, determination set in his gaze. "Karen, why don't you join us? This festival is for everyone, and it's a chance to reconnect as a community." She looked taken aback by his directness, her defenses wavering. "It doesn't change the fact that I disagree with your methods, Max," she replied, but there was a hint of curiosity in her tone. "Maybe we can find common ground," he suggested, lowering his voice slightly, hoping to quell the tension. "Come see what this place means to all of us, what it can mean for you too." For a moment, Karen's icy demeanor softened as she glanced around at the joyful faces enveloped in the spirit of the festival. Despite her reservations, something within her seemed to shift, if only slightly. Before she could respond, a child called out to Max, pulling him away with excitement. As the festival unfolded around him, he couldn't help but feel that something monumental was happening, not just for himself, but for the entire community. The event continued well into the evening, each moment painted with laughter, camaraderie, and a sense of belonging. Max stood with his friends and neighbors, watching the sunset cast a warm glow over the fields. He felt a wave of gratitude wash over him, realizing that this day was just the beginning of the future they could all co-create. As the festival came to a close, the stars twinkling above, Max knew he had turned a corner. No longer were they just individuals living in proximity. They were a community tied together by shared experiences, respect for one another, and, most importantly, a love for the land they called home. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges, but for tonight, under the blanket of stars, everything felt right. The heart of Everbrook Farm pulsed stronger than ever, and with it, Max felt the promise of continued growth, connection, and the beauty of working together. The heart of Everbrook Farm pulsed stronger than ever, and with it, Max felt the promise of continued growth, connection, and the beauty of working together. As the night deepened and the laughter began to quiet, Max took a moment to step away from the festivities. He leaned against the wooden fence at the edge of the field, staring up at the stars twinkling against the velvet sky. Each spark felt like a reminder of the struggles they had faced, and the victory they had just witnessed in their community. However, his reverie was interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Turning, he saw Karen approaching, her expression more pensive than ever. From a distance, instead of the confrontation or disdain he had expected, he noticed a softness in her demeanor. "I'm sorry for how I acted before," she said, her voice almost hesitant. "I came here tonight to shut this down, but it's hard not to feel the energy around the place." Max nodded, knowing how hard it must have been for her to express that. "It's okay, Karen. Change is tough for everyone, especially when it feels like it threatens the way we've always done things. But this farm isn't just about me. It's for the whole community." She looked out over the crowds, watching as neighbors shared stories and experiences. "You've really inspired them. It's incredible to see everyone having fun together." For the first time, her walls seemed to crumble a little. "I guess I wasn't seeing the bigger picture. I was so focused on rules and standards that I didn't stop to realize how much happiness could come from this." Max took a deep breath, sensing an opening. "Maybe we can find a way to work together. What if we set up guidelines that support community events like this, while also preserving the integrity of the neighborhood?" Karen bit her lip, contemplating his words. It was an unexpected spark of collaboration, one that had never crossed her mind. "You're right. I think we could explore that. But it will take a lot of conversations, and it won't happen overnight. Absolutely, he agreed, his heart lifting at the prospect. But if we could form a committee to help plan community events, maybe we could bridge our differences and work toward a shared vision. Her gaze shifted back to the festival. Let's give it a try. Starting small, maybe even getting to know each other better. The faint glimmer of a smile appeared on her lips, and Max matched it with his own. That sounds like a great start. As they talked, the festival began to wind down, and neighbors started to gather their belongings. Max felt the warmth of a newfound alliance blooming between him and Karen, like the seeds of understanding being planted for a greater future. With the evening wrapping up, Max made his way home, feeling lighter than he had in months. The success of the festival resonated within him, and he held on to the hope that it marked a shift in the community, a shift toward collaboration rather than division. Over the following weeks, Max and Karen met regularly to discuss the formation of their community partnership. They worked to establish clear guidelines that would address noise levels, property aesthetics, and activities that could benefit everyone involved. The more they collaborated, the more they discovered common interests, a shared love for gardening, similar values regarding family, and a vision of unity for the neighborhood. The walls between them slowly crumbled, replaced by a growing respect and even friendship. Before long, the Harvest Festival became an annual tradition, bringing the neighborhood together in celebration long after the leaves had fallen and winter had settled in. Families looked forward to the activities, while the local economy benefited from the collaboration, inviting other farms and artisans into the community spirit. The energy of Everbrook Farm radiated beyond its boundaries, inspiring engagement, understanding, and friendships that had once seemed unlikely. Even Karen found herself getting involved, hosting a few book clubs at the community center and sharing her own passion for gardening. One evening, as Max overlooked his fields during a beautiful sunset, he thought about how far they had come. The laughter of children echoed in the distance, mingling with the soft sounds of nature. He realized that he had gained not only allies but also a sense of belonging that had once seemed out of reach. Everbrook Farm thrived under their joint stewardship, the soil rich with memories and possibilities. And as seasons changed, Max found strength not just in the land, but in the ties that bound his community together, a bond forged from understanding, respect, and the magic of collaboration. Max glanced up at the stars again, feeling a deep gratitude for the journey that had brought him here. Whether through the trials he faced or the unexpected friendships he formed, he understood now that their stories would continue to intertwine. Together, they would cultivate not only the land but also the heart of their beloved community, a place where every voice mattered, and every shared moment wove the fabric of their lives into a beautiful tapestry. In that moment, he knew they were just getting started. The future was bright, and as always, it would be cultivated with hard work and a touch of love. The stars twinkled above him, as if to say that this was just the beginning of many more adventures to come.